Good morning all. What a bunch of beautiful people. Absolute pleasure to be part of this, and many thanks for being here. It's going to be a really good show, and it's all around net zero. So I'm Conrad Gillespie. I work for the University of Exeter. My day job is working for the National Satellite Applications Catapult, so we do lots of space-related applications and technologies to help different sectors and different markets. And I'm also the chair of ExIST. So before we begin, just to let you know, people here, there is no fire drills today. So if you hear the alarm, please exit out of one of these two doors and then basically walk around to the front of the building. And in a nice, calm manner. And so ExIST, who are we? So we are Exeter Initiative for Science and Technology, and simply put, we are the STEM innovation arm of Exeter Chamber. So there's so much amazing amount of cutting edge innovations and technologies being developed within the whole of the Southwest region, and for wide-ranging, impactful applications across diverse sectors and markets. Lots going on. And we are here to help to promote and showcase some of that amazing activities. So we can help with impact and showcase regional STEM innovators. You could be an individual with a concept idea, a startup, SME, or an innovation department of a prime, for example, or research, or any number of different stakeholders. We're here to help. And we can do horizon scanning for different funding opportunities. We can share insights about what's happening now and what the future looks like. And we are also very good at connecting people. And we support collaboration. So that could be different researchers, different businesses coming together, consortia, either going for funding opportunities, but really accelerating their innovation so we can connect and support that. And there's a number of different ways. If you're not a member, come on board. It is really cost effective, and we can help to promote what you do. There's other sponsorship options as well around events. You could get involved that way, but also any marketing campaign that we'll be doing going forward. We have steering group meetings. Come along. They're bi-monthly. They're either virtual or physical up at the Exeter Science Park, again, to find out what's going on. You can talk about what you're up to. You might need some help. You might have events that you want to promote, for example, and network with like-minded people. We also have an ExIST Insight magazine that comes out every now and again. Again, we can showcase what you do there. And then, of course, we host events like today. So today is all about net zero and the transition to net zero. Also, on the 14th of July, we've got planned a future for healthcare event. That will be at the Exeter Science Park. We were going to run it back in November, but it was all starting to kick off with COVID, so we felt uncomfortable about that. But now things are opening up. That will be a physical event as well. And then the other ones we've got planned, Green Futures in October at the Futures Skills Centre. So if you want to get involved with that, please come and speak to us. If you want to speak or be part of that, that'd be fantastic. That could be lots of different natural capital innovations, agri-tech, environmental intelligence. So if you've got any ideas, happy to chat. And then also next January, probably in a Plymouth venue, we have Blue Futures. So that could be marine autonomous systems, again, environmental intelligence, marine and maritime technologies and innovations. So today, net zero, we have got a packed line-up. It's going to be a really good show. Just to let you know, we found out late last night from Patrick, the chair of the Net Zero Task Group. Unfortunately, because of a misunderstanding on his part, he's actually in another country. And not ideal. which is a real shame because I wanted to find out more about the Net Zero Task Force, and I'm sure you do as well. Also about the Devon Climate Emergency, the Devon Carbon Plan, and then also the key net zero initiatives that they get involved in. However, Patrick has sent us slides, and after the event, we will be sending out all the consented slides. So there's lots of really good information there, and again, you'll be able to contact Patrick afterwards. So because of that, this is our line-up here. So we've got speakers, and then also we've got networking afterwards, because that is a real crucial, amazing part of physical events. And we've got some exhibitors out there, so please have some conversations to make things happen. Join the conversation. So all you social media lovers out there, here's some hashtags. So please spread the joy and love. And now I'd like to introduce you to our first speaker, Rowley from Exeter City Futures. And again, lots of amazing stuff going on, and we will find out how Exeter City Futures can help you and businesses on your net zero journey. So, Rowley, over to you, sir.
I've been told to stand on the X, but I can't stand still, so I'll do my best. Okay. Hi, everyone. So I'm Rowley Martin. I'm the head of finance at Exeter City Futures. I was formerly a finance technical director at Deloitte, where my job was effectively to, well, it used to be in the grotty world of PFI, but bringing public sector and private sector money together to create infrastructure. That led to energy advisory and then led to renewable energy projects. So I focused a lot on that. I debated a lot about what to cover today. I've only got 15 minutes-ish, because we do sustainable financing is such a broad area. But my job effectively is to try and to create commercial and bankable models that work for a net zero project in the city. So anything that's an on-the-ground project, how do we do an intervention? How do we make that bankable? The reason being that everyone says net zero is just this, it's kind of a term, isn't it? But how do you pay for cycle pathways? Because you can't charge people to use them. How do you pay for retrofit for all the houses? Because it's really expensive and the people who live in them don't want to pay you back for the next 20 years an extra on their mortgage to do it. So how do you make a bankable solution that genuinely makes a difference and makes the city net zero? So I'm going to talk a little bit about how we're doing that at a grand scale. Apologies, I'm not going to be here after the talk. I've got to go to a meeting in North Devon Trust right after this to talk about their net zero key worker accommodation scheme, which is going to be great. But Carly's here somewhere. That's Carly, who can answer any further questions. Or just, I'm happy for you to email me, call me, whatever you need to do, that's fine. Today I'm talking about... hang on, I just need to move mine on as well. Today I'm going to talk about this, which is a big project that we're working on, and I've just come from scrutiny committee at council last night to talk through these slides, where I got a lot more difficult questions than I imagine I'll get today, because you all look very nice. So this is the Exeter Development Fund. So this is basically, this is a project that recognises the fact that we need to change our built environment, that yes, net zero individual interventions are great, but does that work? Does that go far enough unless we change what cities really look like? And how do we break the system that currently exists in the development market, whereby you have the private sector who circle around for a bit of land, grab it, build something, and then at the end of it, all you've got is houses and no green infrastructure, no roundabout infrastructure, no net zero policy being pushed into the delivery of those units. You just get houses. So how do we break that? So effectively what this project is to take or look at all the assets that exist in a city and amalgamate those. Excuse me, hang on. It's to try and take all the assets that exist in the city, amalgamate those into an equity package against which you can then borrow money from a traditional institutional financer and then act as a developer in the city. So you can see here you'd have a structure where all the institutions in the city club together with the help of central government to create a fund that then is able to borrow money and then act as a developer and develop out all your own sites in the city, rather than selling them to a developer. So you keep control, and I'll go through how that always works. But the one-liner really is that government has published all of its ambitions around sustainable, levelling up, carbon zero, and devolving a lot of power to outside of London. So this is a tool that allows us to get there and gives local authorities and cities outside of London a chance to do that themselves. So One Public Estate have funded us to do an outline business case, and we've now got further funding to do a full business case from DLUC. I just want to cover very quickly about Exeter City Futures and what we're supposed to be doing and what we do. So we're a CIC that's owned by the college, where we are now, the university, both councils in Exeter, so Devon and Exeter, the NHS Trust, and Global City Futures, which is a private sector consultancy that just provides a lot of resource into Exeter City Futures. So our mission is to make the city net zero. So I talked earlier about individual projects. They're good and they work, but they don't go far enough. So it's about anything that we can do to make the city net zero, and this fund that I'm going to talk about in sustainable finance is one of those. We've produced a net zero plan, which the council has now adopted, and our job now really is to kind of broker that relationship between how councils set their ambition and how the market will deliver what needs to be put on the ground, on the streets, to make it happen. So just very quickly, so the UK and regional ambitions, we've all seen these published now. There's the Levelling Up White Paper, Climate Change, Net Zero and COP26, Central Government's Build Back Better. You will have seen all of these publications come out recently, and it's really kind of hot topic at the moment. 5 years ago, this kind of language wasn't really being used by central government, and it is now. So there's that, and the Bayes plan for the Green Industrial Revolution, there's like a 10-point plan. You can look all that stuff up, and it's going really hard on, if we build something or do anything in central government, we're going to do it with a sustainability focus. So my challenge is, well, really? So if you are going to do that, then where's the money going to come from, and can we help you do that? But I want to pick on particularly, if I pushed the wrong button. I've pushed stop. Someone might have to help me here. Oh, sorry. Yep, got it. So, Department for Transport, in their kind of recent publication, the takeaway from that report was, you're never going to go net zero in a transport sense unless you change the built environment on which transport runs. So do you remember ages ago you could get those tellies that were HD ready? You couldn't get HD, but you could get an HD ready telly for a while, and then it came online. That's what this is. It's making cities that are net zero ready, so that all the stuff on the ground means that you can plug in all the co-bikes, where's Mark, and co-cars, and so you can plug all the stuff in because it's all there and ready and done. All the cabling's there, and all the renewable energy generation stuff's ready to go, so that we can plug it all in. Otherwise, you're just retrofitting over the top, and their report says that's going to be too expensive. It won't happen at pace. So you've got to change the built environment. Houses need to have no driveways, no garages. They need to have panels automatically fitted. They need to have decentralized energy solutions. So that's really important, and that's what we've looked at and what we're going to talk about today. And it's handy because by 2050, according to the ONS, 66% of the world's population will be living in cities, and that's kind of important. And it's no different in Exeter, where 50,000 houses are going to be built in and around Exeter over the next 20 years, with probably 12,000 in the city. So how do you manage all of that growth without putting another 50,000 cars on the road? We have to build them with a means of getting people from their jobs to their houses without getting in a car, which to some people sounds horrifying, but to like my kids who have no intention of getting a driving license because they're just like, well, I just guess something happened on my phone when it, and someone will pick me up. That's the way things are going. So Exeter's ambition itself is, and they've published this, is to have healthy, active citizens, reduce congestion and enhance mobility, and better housing and better neighbourhoods. Really, it means 15-minute neighbourhoods. Can I get from my job to my house and back again into the shops without having to get in a car or burn any fossil fuels? What's the viable alternative to do that? So a lot of the work that we've been doing is how do we make that happen from a financing and commercial model point of view, rather than just saying it. So we asked the questions have been asked: what does clean, sustainable urban growth look like, and what comprises densification of communities and delivery of 15-minute neighbourhoods? So we need a conceptual application for this, and you need a kind of a head start for how you build that picture of what those neighbourhoods will look like. And fortunately in Exeter, and the reason we've developed this financing model is we've got the Livable Exeter programme, which is a beautifully designed, I don't know if you've seen it, beautifully designed 9-site focus on brownfield sites that exist in the city, where we've got housing developments with public realm, commercial and green space all being designed car-free, ready to go for the city. It's now a question of, having designed it, what does it cost to build it and who's going to finance it? But the ambition is there in the Livable Exeter programme, and if you look it up and do some digging, you'll see that it's really, really, really tight on it, and it's an undiluted vision for the future of the city, which is 12,000 homes in the city that are effectively carbon-free and encourages active travel and live-work communities. So the conceptual vision of the fund that we're trying to pull together, and what we've taken the council through last night, is this in kind of pictorial form. It's to say, when you build houses, you make money. Lots of developers do. And instead of allowing a developer to do that and take the money away back to London and buy a yacht, why don't we wrap our arms around that process and become the developer as the city, as the city owns all the land. The uni's got some land, the county council's got land, the city council's got land, the hospital's got land, and they're all thinking, well, at some point, someone's going to give me a big sum of money for this, and then I can use it on frontline services. And the point is, why don't we pull all that together and upskill the city and become the developer ourselves, so that we can pull those profits into the transition of energy and transport into fossil-free. That's the concept. What are the challenges to that? Well, the pace of delivery is always a challenge in the public sector. We know this. It's difficult. You have to write a business case. You have to apply for grant funding. You have to go through this step-by-step process just to get some money out of government, or some money out of a different pot, and you have to be reactive to certain innovation pots, and it just sort of takes a bit too long. And if you're going to build 12,000 homes, it's too slow. I mean, how quickly they're building homes now, it's not quick enough. Equally, you've got the private sector, and there's no disrespect to the private sector. If you're in business, your job is to make money. That's the purpose of a business, is to make money. So property developers' short-term accountability to their shareholders is the motivation, not the long-term placemaking aspirations of the city in which they put their development. So it makes sense that they kind of don't really care about what happens in 30 years and what our kids are living in. They want to make profit on the development now. So it's not really their fault, but that's the world that we're living in. They are developing houses with that ambition in mind, rather than our ambitions, which is to create a net zero built environment. There's also legislation versus ambition. This is really important. So, as I said, the central government ambition and some of the legislation they're putting through now, which is, for example, you have to build a house with no boiler, or whatever it might be, that's all well and good, but the local plan versus the national ambition, they're always at odds. So in Exeter, for example, the local plan is really, really forward-thinking. So the local plan will be very, very green, very, very carbon zero, but a developer can still say, well, the national strategy still lets me do X, Y, Z, which is at odds with the local plan. So at appeal, I'm going to win. So they still get to put their boxes on greenfield sites, and we can't stop them. That's oversimplifying it, but that's still a possibility. So trying to catch ambition in this city up with legislation is a real challenge to delivering these things. And what it does is it creates urban sprawl, because you end up by just the easier option is just to build on greenfield sites, and you go out and out and out, and then all the cars get stuck on that junction 29 on the motorway. So I mean, that's the reality. That's what we're living in. And imagine if we had 50,000 homes now, how much worse that would be. So this is going to be a difficult read, this bit. Okay, so what we did was we were commissioned to add up what's it going to cost, and we used professional advisors to do all of this. What's it going to cost to build 12,000 homes in the city over the next 20 years, plus all of the infrastructure, health centres, education, public realm, cycle infrastructure, new power upgrades, everything to place make for the next 20 years. And this is what we've got. So somebody in the next 20 years is going to spend this amount of money, somebody will, to build all those homes to catch up with population growth and everything else. Somebody's going to do that. My challenge to those that we talk to is who is that somebody going to be, and to what extent can that be the city collectively and all of us. So recognising the difficulties in delivering all of this stuff, we need something that is publicly owned, because as we discussed earlier, as soon as it's privately owned, the ambition starts to get diluted. Developers make, what, 15, 20% usually, typically? As soon as that starts to become at threat as the development goes along, then they lose the cycle pathway, or they lose the district heating connection, or they lose the air source heat pumps, and they just traditionally connect. That's because it's privately owned and they're pushing towards their shareholder returns. So if we have any kind of delivery structure, it has to be publicly owned. And it has to be impact driven, because it has to have a generally recognised and agreed sense of what are we trying to do with this fund, and what are we trying to do with the land in our city. It also needs to be professionally run. People are traditionally suspicious of commercial type projects that are run by the council, the public sector, or any public body, because their typical job is to do X, Y, Z, not to build commercially innovative communities. So people are generally suspicious of that, and that's probably an erroneous suspicion, but nevertheless, what we're aiming for is a professionally run, commercially developed fund that is populated by the individuals that currently exist in other big developers now, but they're now doing things under a set of impact drivers that delivers net zero. It also has to have locally retained profits. So this means, and going back to the fund structure, if I can skip all the way back, and this bit's really important, is that this fund structure, what it allows for is that every time a development is created and the profit is made, that the fund retains all those profits. So that 20% profit margin that a developer typically makes and then pays to shareholders, look who our shareholders are. They are an NHS trust, a city council, a county council, a university. So these are institutions that live and exist in the city. So you can take those returns on development and push them back into those organisations and into the next project. There aren't shareholders to pay who are just passive income-seeking shareholders. They are people who live and work in the city. So we can retain those profits and push them back into the next project. Am I running over?
Yeah, if you start wrapping up.
Yeah. Okay. So a quick point on viability. This whole thing's really difficult. So all the brownfield sites in Exeter are challenging. So typically what happens is a developer will say, I can build you your houses, but you've got to give me X million quid to get me started because there's a viability gap. So if you want your local infrastructure and your Section 106 or your net zero uplifts on what it costs to build this, I need some money from you, government, to do this. So our model recognises that, and we've said, well, okay, government, well, why don't you just give the money to the fund structure as an equity instrument, and we'll do the building and the development for you, so that it's not just lost as a grant, which is typically what happens. They give grants to developers who then develop something, and it sometimes works, it sometimes doesn't. The purpose of this is to use it as an equity instrument so that the ownership is maintained in the public sector. I will skip this one. So we looked at these options: selling land, running business as usual, which is, as we discussed, what developers do now, and the development fund, which is this structure, as we've seen already. So in the interest of wrapping up quickly, I'll just finish with, we are now still working with the government agencies, with institutional investors who want to be that left-sided commercial lender into the project, and we're working up the business case now to look at which sites we can do and which sites in Exeter will be viable for this project.
Thank you very much, Rowley. Really interesting initiative. Fantastic. I'm sure lots of questions are popping into your head. I know I've got some, but conscious of time to give time for the other speakers. So Rowley's got to dash off, but as he mentioned, his colleague Carly is going to be round, so please find out more in the networking area afterwards. All of these slides are going to be shared. There'll be contact details, so please follow up afterwards, 'cause that's what it's all about. Conversations, making things happen. So we've heard about vision, ambitions and challenges. Our next speaker is Gary from Emerald Green Power, and he's doing some amazing net zero innovations. So Gary, over to you, sir.
Hi everybody. It's nice to actually be live for once instead of being on all these Teams and Zooms and things that we've been doing. Okay. So who am I and why am I talking to you and why am I able to talk to you about somebody who makes some common sense when it comes to different aspects of technology? So I'm ex-Rolls-Royce. I worked for Rolls-Royce Advanced Controls for 15 years. I worked for 7 or 8 years in the US as a CEO of an AI company, and eventually made enough money that I could do my own things and be involved with actual projects that get to net zero and do actual actions rather than lovely reports and lovely documentation. I own 2 companies, or I part own, I'm a founder of 2 companies, both of which are companies that will help us get to net zero. So Hydrostar make green hydrogen, and I'm working on next generations of technology that will make making green hydrogen cheaper. We're being forced to compete with the price of fossil fuel hydrogen, which just doesn't seem to match in with economics, but that's what we're being forced to do. And Emerald Green Power is a brand new startup company. What I did, I wasn't even in England, to be honest. We were working overseas, so I'd got a business in Australia, business in China, business in USA. Coming back to UK because of COVID, I went to see the CEO of Exeter and talked about, what were they going to do about green hydrogen, what were they doing, what was the actual plans. And so I'm working with the City Council, trying to come up with, can we build models and can we build simulations and emulations, which are now called digital twins, in how can we get a city to get to net zero, and how much is it going to cost to get to net zero. So these are the 2 companies, Hydrostar and Emerald Green Power. Quite different technologies, different thought processes, but both are going to be sort of interesting for what we're going to try and achieve. Looking at net zero, people seem to have one idea about what net zero is. There's 2 components to net zero. There's actually reducing your own personal carbon footprint to net zero, and there's actually reducing emissions in a city. And the 2 are not the same thing. For example, changing something that's to do with electricity has nothing to do with the city. The city emissions are not affected by you changing lights to LEDs, for example. The emissions from the electricity is from miles outside the city. Other emissions that are absolutely directly concerned with the city, things like petrol, diesel, natural gas usage, they do create emissions that affect our health. So we have a biochemist on our team who's trying to specifically look at the emissions in a city that are going to affect us the most. And can we start to look at that before we start playing around with net zero? Net zero is a great ambition, but we also have to bear in mind that burning those fossil fuels are causing us all sorts of health problems. It's difficult for me to read that screen so far back, so hopefully I can tell you what these numbers are. So the two numbers I'm looking at here are the actual Exeter City uses for natural gas. And it breaks down into two components. It breaks down into industrial use of natural gas and domestic use of natural gas. If we could reduce those emissions, then that will significantly change both the net zero aspirations of the city and the emissions that are causing health issues. So what we're trying to do all the time with our simulations and models, especially when it comes to the city, is look at both of those two aspects of what we're trying to do, net zero and health. So the CO2 emissions for the city, there's lots of big numbers here, and I can't read the thing without my glasses on. Trying to see some numbers. It doesn't really matter. You can see them yourself. They're huge numbers. It's like the last speaker was saying. I was expecting this screen here to have the presentation on. But the bottom line ends up being the huge numbers. So actually, if we start small and we've got a 20-year plan, we don't have to do everything overnight. So we're not spending $2 billion immediately. We're going to be spending X amount over a long period of time. And we can get private investors to do it, but they want to make money. And so it's a case of we have to accept that that is the case. And if we're trying to get to net zero, how do we fund things is really important. So from my viewpoint, we have access to Swiss investors and European investors that are willing to come and pay for things, but the reality ends up being we as customers have to decide, what's the price that we're going to pay. What's an electrolyzer? How do we make green hydrogen? What do they look like? Well, today's electrolyzers look like that. So the stuff on the left-hand side of that screen. They look extremely industrial, and they are extremely industrial. And the point about them is they can make electricity, they turn electricity into gas, hydrogen and oxygen, and from that we can replace natural gas. Our future vision as Hydrostar is to create technologies that fit applications rather than just trying to do one size fits all, try and find rural applications, building applications, applications for all sorts of different verticals. So our future vision is to bring the price and cost of electrolyzers down, and then what should a plant look like? The city council and the county council are horrified that I want to build a 100 megawatt green hydrogen plant in Exeter. Okay, we're going to have to do it sooner or later, but what will it look like? I'm hoping it looks more like those buildings on the right-hand side, because that's what I see as the future that we want to look like. I don't want to bring industrial-looking components anywhere near the city. It needs to look like something that's green. How are we doing what we're doing? How are we trying to do what we're doing? From this slide onwards, I sort of have to skip into stuff I shouldn't be talking about just yet. But building simulations is one of the ways that you can do things. If you spend time building infrastructure, like we build anything, so solar farms or heat pumps or whatever, the reality is it can cost us a lot of money if we make a mistake. What the best way to do is take the best and brightest people that we've got in the country and build simulations and models of what that would mean beforehand. So for example, a typical 10 megawatt power plant, hydrogen power, so 10 megawatts of electricity from somewhere being used. Sorry, I'm being distracted by the screen coming off. So building a 10 megawatt power plant costs around £25 million. And that's a drop in the ocean of what the city actually needs. So we get very quickly into billions of pounds of worth of infrastructure needed. So how do you sort of work out, should I be fitting new batteries? Should I be making green hydrogen? Should I be selling electricity? What should this plant do? You need really, really advanced simulations and really advanced modelling. And then what you need is third-party verification that what you're saying is actually right. So we've been working with the National Physics Laboratory to make sure that all of our calculations are valid. Emerald Green Power have been awarded a BASE project. Now, I'm not allowed to talk about this, but it's as good a forum as any to start. I came back to the city because of COVID. And in talking to the council members, a lot of people in the council are really bothered about net zero and emissions. And so we put forward a project. We formed a collaboration partnership with City Science, and Joe's here from City Science, and Exeter University. And from that, a brand new company called Emerald Green Power, which was formed only just over a year ago, managed to win a BASE award. And BASE is the group that's from the government that's looking after net zero. So obviously some of our ideas and working as a partnership were clever enough that the government understand, okay, these guys might be quite a small company, but they actually know what they're talking about. Phase 2 of that project, which we hope we will get, is about £5.5 million, and that's to build some sort of net zero aspect of this model and then bring it into the city. What we're working on is urban microgrids. Why urban microgrids? Our biggest problems are the cities, not the rural areas. And Exeter sort of bridges the gap. It's a city, but it's quite a rural city. If you look at it on Google Earth, you'll see that you've got about 2.5 miles across the city, and then we've got green straight outside the city. If you're in London, or Manchester, or Liverpool, or Birmingham, they don't have that luxury. The other thing was we did a detailed analysis of where the emissions are coming from. But not just where the emissions are coming from, where can we make the biggest effect? And that all boils down to industrial emissions. We can make a change if you attack the industrial emissions, if we start to look at how the big industry is using natural gas predominantly. So we're modelling the Marsh Barton Industrial Estate. We're looking at how much green hydrogen could be produced. It's a hydrogen project, so although I've got a hydrogen hat on, it's not just about hydrogen, it's also about electricity. But there's about 14 megawatts of flat roofs on that estate that don't have solar power on them. So you could build a virtual power plant in the city that will start to make a difference for burning the gas turbine, which is also in the middle of the city. If we can find a way that we can put a virtual power plant together, then we start to make an effect. If you take Marsh Barton and Soughton industrial estates, you're talking 20 megawatts of power that won't be controlled by Western Power Distribution. It will be controlled by whoever puts the solar power on those roofs and decides how they're going to use that solar. So we're building complex models. We're at very early stages. We're 4 months into a 6 months program. And BASE still haven't really allowed us to make any press releases and things. Joe and I are both hoping that it's going to be in the next couple of weeks, so that's why I'm hoping I'm not breaking too many rules talking about this project. But in this forum, I think it's important that people do know that stuff is going off. This is real action stuff. This isn't people writing reports. This is going to be people building hardware. So phase 1 tasks all started January the 11th. Here we sit in nearly May. So all of these different elements that's being done by the 3 different groups are already underway and being done. We've built a rapid prototype of what we need, and now what we're doing is working with local industry. We've got 5 different projects around the city where we're actually talking to the owners of businesses, managing directors, about how do they get to net zero and what do we need to do, and we're already modelling their problems and issues. We're not giving them a one bullet's going to solve everything. We're giving them a 5 or 10 year plan depending on what they think their economics are going to be. And that's it from me.
Thanks very much, Gary. Really exciting initiatives going on for the future. We have got time for one or two questions. So if you've got a question, please shout out as loud as you can, because we're not going to have a microphone wandering around.
I was going to say, you mentioned there's 20 megawatts of power across Southton and Marsh Barton. In real kind of applicable term, like more understandable term, what is that? Is that powering someone's home for a whole year? Is that what does that equate to?
Yeah, good question. So the question is 20 megawatts of additional power being created. How could we use that, and what does that equate to? It's a good question. There's no easy answer, because I can use the 20 megawatts in various ways. But if you just took an element of that and said that's enough to probably power all the buildings themselves. So if you just think of a building, average person takes, I think, about 35 kilowatt, whatever. So you could look at it of, all I want to do initially is just use the electric in that building for getting that building to net zero. So it could be that they're making green hydrogen and using that for their boiler. We can change up to 20% of the fuel driving in. So I can put 20% of green hydrogen, and then 80% would be natural gas into that building. So reduce the emissions from the furnace. A lot of the buildings on these industrial estates, especially the Marsh Barton one, is car showrooms with lots of lights that are on all night. I drive through it all the time. I'm amazed at the garages there with those big showrooms. Well, we could charge batteries up and use 5 volt solar systems that would keep them lit as much as they wanted to light up their products in the night time, for example. So there's lots of good things that we could do. But 20 megawatts, I don't know how many megawatts of electricity the city currently uses. We can probably find out easy enough, but it's significant.
Fantastic. Over to you, sir, if you'd like to maybe say your name, who you are, and shout out your question.
My name is Charlie. I run a business called Near Zero by Design, so we're looking at removing carbon from the space manufacturing supply chain. With the product that you've got, the hydrogen generation, what's the scalability of that from smallest model to farm, I suppose? Right,
so the question's about scalability. And so most modern electrolyzers, there's only 3 manufacturers in the whole of the UK. They are focused at the moment on half a megawatt and above, so 500 kilowatts and above electrolyzers. Our electrolyzers that were sort of next generation is going to go from 50 kilowatts upwards. And what we're hoping is we can take it down to sort of a farm size and make it that's economically viable for a farmer to go off-grid. And believe me, nearly all the farmers want to go off-grid. And the other thing is that we're looking at is off-grid hydrogen production. At the moment, it's very expensive for somebody who makes a solar farm. If they're not near a grid connection, how do they produce electricity and sell it to the grid? So what we're looking at is off-grid hydrogen production. So what you do is use a solar farm to make green hydrogen. You don't need to be coupled to the grid. We use a tube trailer and deliver the hydrogen where it's needed, at a service station or wherever it might be needed.
You get quite a lot of localization with that, which is obviously beneficial for the transport.
Right, and the hardest point as a company is trying to focus down on, where's the money, as it were. The bigger, the bigger the units you make, it's easier to sell one megawatt unit than 20 50 kilowatt units.
Great, thank you.
My pleasure.
Fantastic. And yes, so that's all we've got time for. But Gary's going to be around at the networking session, so please have a conversation with Gary. And also these slides are going to be available as well with contact details, so you can follow up with Gary afterwards. Thanks very much.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
That's what the future could look like. Really, really interesting. It's Carl. It's Carl.
Oh, it's Carl.
Yeah. And so next up is we have Carl from Hawley, and he'll be talking about building for a net zero future. So Carl, over to you, sir.
Thank you, Carl. That's what it says in the title anyway, doesn't it? So, it might not be quite like that. I wonder, following Gary's talk, whether blue hydrogen, the term blue hydrogen is a misnomer. Should it be brown hydrogen? green hydrogen by electrolysis, blue hydrogen by, a chemical process. But that's another conversation. Anyway. So I'm Carl Friedrich. I'm the director of Hawley. We're consulting engineers, previously a partner, recently taken over. We're the guys that design the systems within buildings that make them work. So if it's a house, no big deal. If it's a hospital, a very big deal, or a factory, or a car engine plant, or an aquarium, or a zoo, or whatever it might be. I've been involved with energy conservation for 36 years. I got my qualification at Cranfield University when there was a chance that oil was going to run out in the next 40 years. Obviously hasn't happened. I'm not going to bore you. We all know about climate change. All I'm here to say at the moment is that the built environment, my world of buildings, accounts for 25% of carbon emissions. As an aside to that, I do a lot of work with the NHS and all the large hospitals in the southwest. And actually, in the health care and social care estate, the bit I do actually equates to about 18% of the carbon emissions. The rest of it is transport, equipment, 3% from inhalers, 2% from medical gases. Just like chuck that in. This isn't new. This is really not new. Energy crisis versus climate crisis. In 1973, none of you remember that. We had an oil crisis. Guess what? 3-day week, the price of hydrocarbons went through the roof. 3-day week, as I said, lights went off at 10 o'clock. There's inflation spiked, lack of productivity, etc. It was a real issue. And we all ran around, some of us did, I was still at school, worrying about turning the lights off at night. And it didn't take long for us to forget that issue. But guess what? In 1980s, 86, when I left to finish my MSc, we were still worried about hydrocarbons running out, 40 years' time. And, we came up with a lot of documentation about how we should be saving energy and not wasting our fuels because it was all going to run out, which hasn't happened, obviously. And it's not going to happen, but we've got the climate crisis to worry about. So what is it about the human psyche that we panic, and we're panicking at the moment, we'll be for the next 10, 20 years, and then when there's a energy source or the energy fuel price comes down, we all relax and think, that's okay, I'll go and buy a next big car, or I won't worry too much and worry about my holiday rather than the climate. It's an odd thing about the human psyche. But on the good side, in the southwest, we're punching above our weight again. We always do. I'm talking about the greater southwest. Over time, going back centuries, we've always punched above our weight, whatever sector we're talking about. We are the likes of Emma at Exeter City, with the leisure centre, the Passive House Leisure Centre being handed over tomorrow. Is it a Passive House? Yeah, the first one in the country, second one I think in the world possibly. Brilliant stuff. We have Plymouth City Council, Exeter City Council, Devon County Council, Cornwall County Council, all aiming for zero carbon in 2030. It's a tough ask, but at least they're striding for it. We have Exeter City Futures, we've already spoken about them this morning. The Eden project, and that slide is of the hot rocks drill that's being used at the moment to try and generate some very hot water and some steam in the far southwest. Regen Southwest, of course, and the Met Office, Centre of Climate Change Research in the UK. We are very lucky people down here. We have the brilliant universities, all of them. Exeter, both at Penryn with their renewables team. Exeter, obviously in Exeter. Plymouth, Marjon as well. And we have the National Marine Aquarium and, of course, the Marine Park, a recent innovation, where they're doing a phenomenal amount of work on seagrass, a very important aspect. So we're Passive House experts down here. Interestingly, the NHS are going to release a paper very shortly saying they're not going to quite go down the Passive House route, which is sort of a shame. We have hot rocks potential, where this hot rocks facility in Cornwall could feed 2,000 houses and possibly the Trellisk Hospital as well. We have PV in a big way. We mentioned it earlier, I think, that the F-line grid connection couldn't take as much the renewable energy we were generating in the southwest. And we have EV in a big way coming on stream on the road and the marine aspect. So in Plymouth now, we have the first marine battery charging facilities. And it's all because we're aiming towards advancing net zero and getting to every building to be net zero by 2050 and every new building by 2030. So we're trying hard, all of us. We're all here because we're trying hard to achieve this. But bear in mind, we're 2022 at the moment. Time's going on. 7.5 years, 7 a bit years till 2030. And that's why people, I think, some clientele are starting to panic and think about, well, what box can I tick? What black box can I buy that's going to solve my net zero problems? Well, actually, there isn't really one. It's not as simple as that. It's very complex, as we've just talked about. There are plenty of people, we've heard from some this morning, and we will do today, who can give advice on this. We're one of them, there are plenty of others. But fundamentally, looking at the first box, assets, we need to know what you're consuming. Now, I've spent 30-odd years, more than 30 years, in designing buildings, designing systems that make buildings work, and specifying building energy management systems. So we theoretically, in every building, every commercial building, every public sector building, should have at least 30 years of data that we could analyse on an hourly basis. Those systems are installed and would be recording energy data if the metering's right, it's been commissioned correctly, it's been wired up right, and people have been maintaining it. I'm constantly surprised when people come and ask for us to do something in terms of net zero with the technology. You say, where's your energy data? We haven't really got any, or it's not appropriate, or it's I can give you last month's. You know, there should be decades worth of data. So any estate manager here, any building owner, I think a first point of call would be to start looking where all your energy data is and how it's been recorded, and start doing some analysis. So then reduce, you know, with that analysis, you can start reducing energy demand in your building. You can then might think about what renewables you might attach to your building. We've mentioned PVs as an obvious one. And then you might think about buying off-grid or buying green energy. The NHS can do that at the moment, albeit obviously it costs a lot more money for their green electricity, so that's an issue in itself. And then the political hot potato of offsetting, which is mentioned by the Green Building Council, it's mentioned in a lot of places, but of course in the public sector, if you're trying to build a hospital and part of your component to get to net zero is offsetting, the question might be, well, are we going to spend millions of pounds offsetting, or are we going to spend millions of pounds on actually buying some new equipment or some extra staff or a new building or whatever? So that is highly charged. But at the end of that process, you might be able to verify whether you're net zero or not. Again, let's say there are plenty of people who can go and give you advice, technical evaluations, demand modelling, generation modelling, economic evaluation. It's all part of a play, and it takes, you know, it's complicated. There's not quite an easy solution. Technologies, I'll just touch on briefly. Non-nuclear, I mentioned fusion at the bottom. Heat pumps. Heat pumps have come on rapidly. I'm guessing you all know what they are, but these devices, you know, produce thermal energy from, we've all got a heat pump in our houses. It's called a fridge. So you take heat from inside the fridge and chuck it out the back, and that's the heat. And they work like that. Their coefficients of performance have been increasing rapidly. The global warming potential of the refrigerants is getting better and better. And fundamentally, for low thermal temperatures, sort of 40 degrees heat output for a well-insulated building, we can get coefficients of performance of, say, 4. Where people are talking about direct replacements of boilers in larger buildings, I'm afraid that COP goes down to about 2. And bear in mind, 1 is like a direct electrical installation. Heat pumps, air, water source, ground source. I mentioned the 5th generation thermal networks. Imagine a retail estate where some facilities, cafes, restaurants are dumping heat while they're cooling the building, and some people are trying to heat their buildings. Well, if you have a thermal loop linking the whole lot, running at, say, 35 degrees or something like that, some people are dumping heat into that network, some people are taking heat out of that network, all by the virtue of use of heat pumps. There's even heat recovery from sewage, which is coming, you know, might emanate from a station that's sort of 10, 15 degrees constantly. There is a system in Bournemouth working now, I believe, and it will become quite common. For ground source heat pumps, and Kenza are a big supplier, producer in Cornwall, very important. They concentrate on ground source heat pumps. The thing is, ground source, you know, costs £10,000 to bore a borehole. 100 metres of pipe down, 100 metres of pipe back up. They can get quite expensive, but I'll come on to that. PVs, they're increasing in efficiency all the time dramatically now. I think 200 gigawatts of installation is planned this year worldwide, and that will keep growing. But it's the infrastructure always that's maybe the issue, and we've touched on that already today. Same with wind farms. Great, many offshore, onshore, be an issue in terms of do you want one next to your house, and they're getting bigger and bigger. We're talking about diameters 105 metres now in terms of blade diameter. Comes down to electrical infrastructure and storage. All the Western powers of this world, you know, they're working as hard as they can. It'd be nice to see some of those guys in these sort of events, really, to talk about how they're overcoming the infrastructure issues. It will all boil down to infrastructure. we have plenty of areas where we can generate renewable energy, but it's actually plugging it into the grid, as alluded to earlier by Gary, and what you might do with that. And storage, the big key is storage, and hydrogen's got to play a massive part in that. All the storage will not be facilitated by batteries. We've got to be talking about hydrogen in some way. How we use that hydrogen is another issue. Gary's mentioned about vehicles or whatever, or generating electricity. Maybe we should be using hydrogen to create fertilizer, which is an energy-intensive process, or even steel. I love fuel cells. Again, we talked about them producing electricity directly from hydrogen to electricity, directly. Brilliant, brilliant technology, but very old, actually. And then fusion. Fusion is always seen as 10 years away, isn't it? Fusion's just around the corner. Even cold fusion was very exciting about that. Some excitement about that a few years back. It's always 10 years away. I hope we see it one day in a commercial application. In terms of fossil fuel transition, the thermal aspect, the big blue triangle is the projected use of air source heat pumps, i.e. taking heat out of the air and then using that to heat our buildings. You see the oil and gas diminishing rapidly there, and there's a little line at the top for ground source heat pumps. What I'm going to beg you to do, though, when somebody asks you to install an air source heat pump, and you think that's going to be a panacea, think about the noise aspect as well. Because when we're all running around, we'll all have air source heat pumps installed outside our houses and every commercial building. Make sure the noise aspect is taken care of, because that 50 hertz hum, 100 hertz hum all night will drive you around the bend. So the changing electricity landscape in terms of generation, the left-hand graph, obviously what we have with the power stations, and it's changing rapidly now in terms of all the smaller power generation sources, whether it be PVs or wind or hydro. That's changing very rapidly. And it will get bigger. I don't actually show the offshore stuff, but that's a major component as well. In terms of the planners, along with the infrastructure providers, these guys have got a really tough ask as well. Right, why isn't there a PV on every roof in Exeter, on all those big sheds? Because they damn well should be. But, again, it's connecting up to the infrastructure. In California, it's law. You can't put a roof up without having a PVs on it. We have 28 megawatts just in Southton Marsh Button, we just heard about. Some, maybe not in Exeter, but some of those guys selling the cars, some are jumping on it now, and they're actually trying to get their electrical vehicle installations, charging facilities sorted out rapidly. There's going to be quite a few arguments, whether it be Southton Marsh Button, or Derriford, or Plymouth, in terms of people who sell cars arguing about who's going to get the power supply that's actually available, because it'll take a few decades now before we get that stuff sorted out. I've shown this little map because Plymouth, we're in the southwest are going for this Freeport free zone area. It's called a free zone. It goes from Plymouth all the way to Plimpton and Sherford. And the fact is, the Sherford Energy Centre was a gas-fired power station at the moment. That's where the serious hydrogen, big hydrogen plant is proposed to be. Let's see if it happens. Planners have a tough ask, and it is about infrastructure. Right, lessons. So I'm a consulting engineer, as I've just said. I do mechanical and electrical installations. And I've had a client very recently, in the last few months, who said, look, I've got a box to tick here. It's really important we get to net zero very quickly. That's what I've been told to do. Just do it. So go into a building, and the brief was replace the oil-fired boilers with a zero-carbon technology, a heat pump. Just make it happen. Well, I went to site, which is old 20s and 30s buildings, hospital site. There's some 80s porta cabins. And some of the buildings, that's an acro holding the roof up, right, were in very bad repair. The boilers, the oil-fired boilers, are only 2 years old, cost tens of thousands of pounds to put in a few years ago. They still had critical windows, there's metal frame windows from the 20s and 30s, and there's plenty of unused space being heated. The priority for that client was not installing zero-carbon technology. The priority was sorting out the Fabric First issues of the fab whole estate, which included knocking some of the buildings down, because it was just ridiculous. Now, maybe I'm near retirement, I'm brave enough now, but I actually told them like it was. I didn't say, OK, I'll put in some sort of heat pump. I just gave them a design, and it, to be honest with you, the total package in terms of refurbishing the whole hospital would have cost an absolute fortune. I put this slide in next because I can, but it's the other side of zero carbon and sustainability, where we took, the Market Hall in Devonport. Please go and look at it. It's a fantastic facility, an old 19th century building. There's no point knocking it down. It's a fantastic facility, and it's listed. We insulated as much as we could. It's totally digitally enabled. And it's got the largest immersive dome in the UK, I'm told. And we use zero carbon technologies wherever possible, but we could not make the building zero carbon. I love this slide because it actually shows astronaut on the moon landing in 1969. And I mention it because not only is it a good slide showing some older technology and a newer technology in this big dome, but they use fuel cells on the Apollo missions. I think that's where fuel cells were first invented. And in that time, I just mentioned to make the point that the population of the Earth has actually doubled. So it ain't getting any easier. Our future and predictions and things, we all make predictions and look at the past. This character here is called Steve Warren Brown. He runs YGS Landscapes. He's a landscaper. I've got no axe to grind with him. I know him. He's just a brilliant bloke, and his mission, apart from being a landscape gardener, is to plant a forest in every school he possibly can. He's certainly achieving that in Plymouth. Not every school, if the first schools have started. It's available to anybody in the southwest, and it is just fantastic. So he spends an awful lot of money helping little ones plant trees and talk about sequestration and offsetting sustainability. 60 years ago, we talk about predictions. Prime Minister at the time, Wilson, was talking about the white heat of technology. Nuclear fission, we wouldn't bother. We wouldn't have any issues at all because everything's going to be electric. Nuclear fission was solve all our problems. Didn't happen, did it? 40 years ago, I mentioned we're all going to worried that we're going to run out of oil and gas in 40 years. Hasn't happened. 20 years ago, of course, I say 20 years ago, we suddenly started getting very serious about climate change, but here we are 20 years later, still trying to meet the challenges. Part of that, sequestration and offsetting will be part of the, we will have to do, but it's going to take 50 years for our forests to grow, isn't it, if we start planting them now. Solar, wind, and storage has got to be a major component of that, with a massive growth in solar energy production and wind. And nuclear fission's got to play a part, because there's times of the year, even in the winter, when the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine. 10 years plus, hydrogen. Let's hope so. I think it's got technology. There's quite a few commentators who think hydrogen is not the answer on the electrical vehicle side of things. I don't want to get into that argument. And maybe in 30 years we will have nuclear fusion, where maybe electricity will be free and cheap. And to finish off, just by mentioning cryptocurrency and blockchain. So I was only listening to a podcast by The Economist yesterday where Mark Carney, when he was still governor of the Bank of England, was talking about how important it was for the banks to be on top of the climate change issue, because if they're behind the curve, it's going to be really serious. But in the same podcast, they started talking about cryptocurrency, where at the moment, I think the statistic is we're using the power consumption of Belgium equivalent to mine cryptocurrency. In my mind, that can't be right. It's just wrong. You'll have another opinion on that. But maybe quantum computing will come and solve the day. I don't know. It's beyond me. All I know is I've heard the statistic. I hope it's true. That a quantum computer will be able to do in 3 weeks what our fastest computer on Earth today can do in 10,000 years. If that's true, the mind is just boggling, but maybe that'll come up with all the answers. In the meantime, keep planting those trees. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Carl. Absolutely fantastic. Again, fascinating stuff. Unfortunately, we haven't got any time for questions now, but please speak to Carl afterwards in the networking session. These slides will be available, and of course, contact details. And Carl is an avid stakeholder in the ExIST community, so please, if you're not on board, get on board, and you can have lots of different conversations. So next up, we have Amanda, who is the head of Net Zero at Satellite Applications Catapult, and she'll be highlighting some of the space-enabled net zero initiatives that are happening at the moment.
Thank you very much. So hi everyone. So I work in space innovation, specifically net zero, which is probably the most buzzwordy job title you think. What that actually means. So first of all, would you please stand on X? Oh, yep, sorry, forgot about that. Thank you, and I hear my speaker now. So I'm not sure if you're aware of the Catapult network. So we are part of a network of catapults covering different technological areas, and the purpose of the catapults are to grow scientific capabilities in specific areas, and for mine it's specifically satellite and space technology. The catapult's purpose is to bridge the gap between business, academia, research and government. We're a world-leading network of technology and innovation centres. We are key to transform specific sectors and grow services and generate sustained economic growth for the future. And we're overseen by Innovate UK, UKRI, and we're strategically located across the UK. So specifically for the Satellite Applications Catapult, we're a world-leading non-profit technology and innovation centre. We collaborate, we don't compete, and we're government-backed, neutral and trusted. And our purpose is to innovate for a better world empowered by space. So, what's our strategic vision? It is to accelerate the growth of the satellite application sector by focusing on 3 themes across targeted markets. So we energize technology, we empower companies, and we enable technologies. We have different market focus areas: extractive, agriculture, finance, construction, health, sustainable development, intelligent transport, infrastructure. And for myself in Net Zero, it crosses basically all sectors and all themes and all parts of the company. So we don't just work with the Catapult network, we also work with the broader space ecosystem, particularly here in Exeter, but we also work with Scottish Space, Cornwall, Coast, and there's different space clusters across the UK. We work internationally, we work with lots of universities. These are probably a bit outdated with the dates here. But yeah, we've got a number of centre of excellences and constantly growing. It's exciting. So technological focus areas and how it's related to net zero. So if we think about it, 4 main themes: ubiquitous connectivity, geospatial intelligence, access to space, and emerging technologies. So all of these technological focus areas cross all the applications and all market sectors. So from transport, agriculture, mining, renewable energy, etc., and transport. So first of all, ubiquitous connectivity, and what is its role in space and net zero? So ubiquitous connectivity is super fast, always on connectivity for the digital age. So what is the context in the net zero future? We're talking about Internet of Things and building on networks, autonomous EVs, and internet access to all. So for instance, we've got a project at the moment called 5G Rural Dorset, and it's getting available internet access to all, so enabling the future of a net zero economy. It's supporting operational efficiencies from precision farming, reducing waste across supply chains, and creating smart grids as well. And a key part for net zero is the supply chain transparency. So the role in the data creating for the in blockchains. So for instance, I was on a call 2 days ago on how can we, I'm not sure if you've ever looked at a scope 3 emissions and tracking your supply chain emissions, and basically being able to use the blockchain to go back, verify and check and actually qualify where the farmers and where the resources are coming to. So tracking scope 3, and then non-fungible tokens and carbon credits as well, and the role in the data and satellites for spreading those. In regards to access to space, it's a very exciting area. It was really great to mention the Apollo mission and how that they were using fuel cells in their technology. So what can we do both looking out externally from the planet, and how can we benefit for bringing it back into our planet and making it better for Earth? So first of all, I'm working a lot on the environmental impact of our sector, from sustainable launch and the fuel used for that, manufacturing and space debris as well. So taking a circular economy and a life cycle approach to the manufacturing of parts and taking in consideration the end of life of them. And then also a very key part is one of the heaviest parts of the space and satellite sector, so the most impactful parts, is the data processing. How can we make that more efficient? How can we do it in external places? Then regarding sustainable energy, there is a space-based solar power initiative, which the Catapult is supporting of. This is quite exciting technology where essentially solar is collected from satellites externally out of our atmosphere, concentrated into a microwave and beamed back down to Earth. So it's the accessibility of data regardless of what the weather is on the time and constantly 24/7. There's a lot of work on nuclear reactors, both terrestrially and in space, and then the availability of mining minerals. And I know probably quite a few of you have seen Don't Look Up, so not on that sort of scale. But what are we doing to enable, for instance, the electrification of vehicles? Do we have enough resources? And what role does it come in when we're going to start taking these from other planets? things coming by. And then there's another aspect of life on other planets. How can we create systems to survive traveling to Mars, and how can we apply those learning and technologies and apply them to us on the ground? And then the cross-application of technologies for space travel and how we can make the most of it here. Geospatial intelligence focuses on, which is the predominant focus, I would say, in the climate science realm. And it is an ever-growing demand for information that is accurate, personalised, localised, and available globally in real time. So we're looking at feature intelligence, monitoring, forecast, and management. In particular, the role of geospatial intelligence from an Earth observation has been very critical in climate change. Keep moving off, sorry, I'm a walker. Has been critical in climate change. So over 60% of the essential climate variables, which are demonstrated in this image here, have been measured exclusively from space. So this data has directly fed into the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. So it's basically driven the policy and the decision making. However, now we're in the decade of delivery. So we're now going beyond policy change. We now need to be delivering. So this climate science needs to move beyond policy and into applications, which is a significant focus of where my area is at Catapult. So the capabilities and the applications are constantly evolving. We've got new data sets from the Copernicus program, and we've got improvements in methane monitoring, carbon dioxide monitoring from space. We're getting more detail and more precision, which means that the evidence is growing, and we're able to verify different emissions and improve the decision making. And this is often called ground truthing as well, so providing the evidence. We have constantly increasing processing capabilities, which means we're gathering more and more data. So the more data you have, the more informed your decisions can be on climate change. And the key part here is increasingly accessible. So climate science is not just for the scientists and the policymakers. It has to be for the business decisions and for the individuals making it mainstream. Final point is emerging technologies. Space is an enabler. Space can't really solve challenges. Sorry, space technology can't really solve challenges on its own. It has to work with an array of technologies and sectors. It also touches every single sector, and you're all using space and satellite technology now, or have you been on your phone, from making bank transfers to GPS to how you found your location here. But its role in net zero is really, it needs to be partnering and working closely with other technologies, and it might not be the most obvious solution, but it will be there in the background. So as mentioned earlier, AI and machine learning, example of digital twins. So we've got a program with Oxford University called the AI for Earth Institute. And as we were saying earlier, basically building on the data sets to improve the accuracy in decision making in the climate decisions of actions. It's really critical in Scope 3 emissions verification. So an example being carbon disclosure project, when companies are recording and declaring on their emissions and their supply chains, they'll do a geospatial location. So you can use satellites to check and verify those. Scope 3 blockchain accuracy, mentioned earlier, basically tracking the transactions in your supply chain and where really they're coming from, and what is the impact of the ground there, and are you missing any transport links there? Verification with terrestrial observations. So as I said, space also not just from the technological perspective, but also on the ground. So monitoring biodiversity measures. Net zero is a focus of today, but the consequences are going to be significant on biodiversity and on our food systems. When we talk about ESG, I like to say that net zero is the low-hanging fruit and the easier thing to achieve when measuring the environment in compared to biodiversity. So this area is significantly growing here, and its role in choosing and delivering on nature-based solutions. Support for carbon markets, both in the verification and decision-makings of where they're going, and it's very early days. I'm working a lot on satellites' role in the long-term monitoring of nature-based solutions and carbon markets for the investments in those. And the role of intelligent legislation. So as we constantly build on data every year, well, not even every year, it's constantly building on data, legislation takes a while to change and improve. Actually, what is satellite's role in the data and driving and moving this forward? And then finally, people are so critical to climate change and to the roles. There's JNC's Triple Win framework, which highlighted the importance of satellites for solutions and investments which improve people, planet, and the climate, and satellites are critical for those. So to summarise, so over half of the essential climate variables were measured from space, so it's always been critical in climate change. Satellites provide an unbiased evidence to inform decision makers, and space is uniquely positioned to support climate action. How am I for time?
I think it's definitely worth wrapping up.
Yeah, cool. And then I'll wrap up now instead of doing case studies.
Cool. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Very good overview about how space can help. So Amanda's here, so please talk to her afterwards in the networking session. As always, the slides will be available, and please get in touch to find out more. So next up, we have Andy from the European Space Agency, and he will highlight some of the net zero funding opportunities available for people. So Andy, over to you, sir.
Thank you. God, I'm very impressed how quick you are at sorting that out. You're very good at the tech, Usually it'd be a nightmare. Okay, yeah, so I'm Andy Williams, and I'm the European Space Agency's Business Applications Ambassador for the southwest of the UK. It's a mouthful to talk through that, I can tell you. So I was going to say at the start, there's two words that sound maybe scary, but they're not scary. One is European, and the other is space. So Amanda's already sort of covered space, and space isn't scary, so don't think, what can I do with space? Forget about it, I'm not interested, because there is a lot you can do. And European, because I'm going to be talking about funding, you all of a sudden think, well, European funding, that could be a bit tricky now. But it isn't in this scenario, because as I think I'll put there, the European Space Agency is a different organisation to the EU and the EC. So the UK is very much part of the European Space Agency, and so funding is available. So my main message today is if you think you've got some innovative ideas in the net zero domain, then funding is definitely available. I think that's the really key message I want to get across. Okay. So space, I'm not going to go through this in detail. You can think, yeah, okay, rockets, astronauts, etc. But it's very much used in everyday activities as well. And that's what I'm focusing on. And so the applications and the funding opportunities that I'm talking about are very much about the use of space assets in everyday activities, okay? So within the European Space Agency, there are a bunch of different types of business development support. There's technology transfer, so spin in and spin out of technology. There's a business incubation centre for startups who are interested in starting up and getting support. But I'm going to focus in on the last one there, which is business applications, which is really more substantial funding for innovative ideas, okay? So that's what this is really about. And then the support that's there to support that. So the eligibility to get this funding is sort of, you can split it down into three things. One is commercial focus. It's not an R&D program, so it's not about widget building. It's about using those widgets in commercially sustainable applications, okay? And then there needs to be customer engagement as well. So in our context, in net zero context, customer must be involved in the application. They must be, happy to have this, whatever the service is. So I think that's an obvious one. And then finally, this is the important one, space must be somewhere in the value proposition, whether it's the use of satellite communications or Earth observation data or satellite navigation or a mixture of those. Those must be embedded, let's say, in the overall service that you want to deploy. And if you can tick those three off, then funding is basically available. I think that's the key point here, yeah? So this is a nice example of various space-based technologies, and it's when you combine those and merge those with innovative technologies, which haven't got anything to do with space actually, that's when they can create real value in downstream and various markets, okay? So we've heard a few today. We've heard about blockchain, but also artificial intelligence, machine learning. You can combine those with some sort of data or asset from space to deliver it into a particular market sector, such as healthcare or agriculture or transport, whatever it is. Give you a really good and simple example of the tractor. I mean, this is an advanced tractor, because one, it's using Earth observation data to monitor the crop, so it knows when to go out and to actually efficiently crop the particular field. It's using satellite navigation because it needs to exactly know which tracks to go down and when to turn and things like this. And then finally, it's in the middle of nowhere. There's no mobile connectivity, so it uses satellite communications to actually do the connectivity. So here's a perfect example of an application which is utilizing space-based data, and it's a commercial application. So yes, you could get funding for this. I've got some specific examples there, but I'm not going to go through them. The best thing to do is go up to that website up there, business.esa.in/projects, and there's a whole host of projects on there, and a lot of them are environmental. There's a lot of environment. I've just picked up two here, one around monitoring of forests, and the other around monitoring of marine litter. So one is agricultural and looking at the forestry side of things. The other is maritime. But they're really across the board. There's a lot of opportunities. And again, utilizing space as part of the value proposition in the delivery of that service. I'm not going to go through that in detail because I want to focus in on one particular call that's coming out. But if you're interested, just come and talk to me afterwards about the way the funding works. So there's two types of calls. There's an open call, which is open all the time. Basically, any idea, any industry, as long as it basically ticks those three boxes that I mentioned earlier, commercial focus, customer engagement, and space in the value chain. And then the theme calls is the one that I want to focus in on, because I'm going to show you a list of the theme calls, and we're going to drill into one of them. So there we go. So yeah, the application process, there's an initial application process, which is a pre-qualification, followed by an outline proposal and full proposal. So, as an ambassador, I help through that process. But it's not like a big, heavy proposal to start with. It's typically a lot sort of simpler than that to get going. And these are the theme calls, and there's a bunch of long-term calls which are open quite long-term. Healthcare, tourism, safety and security, and then there's a few shorter-term calls. I'm going up from the bottom. There's space applications in public safety, space applications in green energy utilities, which I think is relevant to one of the talks earlier, digital supply chain and how space can help with the supply chain across various sectors. But I'm going to focus in on the top one and just quickly mention it, space acting for decarbonisation, because it's just dead relevant to the talk today. It's coming out in May and it closes in July, and it's a theme tender, and I've got a bunch of words there. Rather than go through the words in detail, I put it on the slide because you'll get the slide pack later and you can look at it. But the best thing to do is go off and have a look at the website, so Space Acting for Decarbonisation. So what the focus of this is how can space help with really the net zero agenda? And they're really looking for both customers and innovators to come together, and ESA will basically offer, I think, €200K per activity, okay? And it can be in any focus area, whether it's energy and utilities, whether it's transport, buildings, heavy industry, food production. I mean, that's just an example. And really, how can you utilize and foster space-based assets and other innovations such as in digital twins, for instance, or AI, machine learning, Internet of Things. What can you do to actually innovate into those sectors and help with that? And ESA are very keen to fund these activities because they're very, very, very much on board. And the money in the UK comes through the UK Space Agency, which is an agency underneath BEIS, and BEIS is in the UK, as we learned earlier, is completely on board with the net zero agenda. So there is funding available. So if you're interested, please come and talk to me, okay? So that is me. I'm down there. I'm based in the southwest. There's also a bunch of other ambassadors dotted around the country as well, but I'm happy to follow that up. And yeah, that's me pretty much done. I think, yeah, they're just the benefits of following up with these types of opportunities. You know, there's a lot of support out there to get involved, and there's a big network actually once you get involved with these sorts of projects. Okay, I think that's me. So please do come and talk to me afterwards, or hook up with me on LinkedIn is probably the best. Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Andy. Fantastic stuff. So there you go. Come and chat to Andy afterwards. That funding call, obviously the deadline's the 8th of July, so it's pretty soon. Come and chat to him afterwards. And next up, we have Richard from BCR Associates, and he's going to be talking to you about the practical solutions for business on their journey to net zero. Over to you, Richard.
Thank you very much. I presume we're just... Excellent. Yeah, thanks for the introduction. I'm conscious I stand between you and networking and another coffee, so I will keep my 5-minute talk, which I've managed to get down to 6 minutes, brief. We're looking at practical solutions for getting SMEs to net zero. There are 5.5 million companies in the UK. 99% of those are SMEs, and the SMEs account for 50% of all the emissions of the UK. Unfortunately, only about 2% of the SMEs in the UK have actually 2% of the SMEs in the UK have actually sort of measured their carbon emissions. So here, in a whistle-stop tour, is how you, in your businesses, me in my business. I'm not involving public sector in this because that's a whole different ball game. But us the simple folk in the who are just trying to make a quick living get to do it. Right, this is a business, your business, my business, any business. Hopefully we're sort of profitable and we're growing. And over the top of that, the government has laid the requirement to go net zero, which is fine. So for me, there's 4 things we need to be doing, which we're doing with our clients. We are a procurement consultancy. We operate in the net zero area with clients. The 4 things I say to my clients are, you need to have a baseline. It's been mentioned before, but as one of my colleagues said, you don't go on a diet without weighing yourself. Unless you know what your baseline is, you can't really make a start. And there are fairly easy ways of doing that. There's levels of doing it. Some can go very complicated, but also you can do a very simple one from a purchase ledger. In fact, we have an open offer to the chamber. If somebody wants to do that, we'll happily do that for free. 2/3 of the emissions are energy related. There's scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. Hopefully everybody knows what scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 are in the net zero world. Scope 1 and 2 are primarily energy. We can look at that. So energy management, knowing where your energy and how much energy you're using is vital. Once you know where your energy is being used and how much you're using, you've got to look at energy efficiency because we need to move to more efficient, less emissions from our energy. And of course, the big thing is costs. We're not all awash with money. We can't just jump in and sort of throw technology at this. We can't throw loads of money at it. Hopefully, the majority of what we will do in net zero and getting businesses to net zero, and you'll get your business to net zero, is going to be cost neutral. So where do we start? If we're focusing on energy, really metering and monitoring, because I have clients, fairly large clients. So one spends £8 million a year on energy. Whose sole data around their energy is their half-hourly data given them 8 weeks later on a spreadsheet. If you're collecting meter readings on a spreadsheet and holding that with the environmental manager, or you're doing monthly meter readings, I'm sorry, that's not really good enough. Every meter, about 99% of all the meters in the country, really are capable of delivering if not automatic data, either daily or monthly. You need to sort of get on board with that and put sub-metering in and actually understand where your energy is going. Once you've got data, and you're saying talk about data later, there's decades of data out there. Unfortunately, we can't get hold of it. Is having the data you do get, put it through analytics. There's a whole world of AI and machine learning now that not only it's telling you where your data, your metering will tell you how much you've used and which buildings have used it on your physical meters, but using analytics to look at what's going on at machine level. We put, you can put kit on it on each machine. You can put it at area levels. We can use AI and machine learning to actually to tell you what's going on within your building, and that's pretty much the only way you can make decisions, or practically at the lower level. And obviously reporting on your KPIs. If you're not measuring what you're doing, you're not having targets, not having KPIs, then you really sort of you're just drifting. Going back to the carbon footprinting, once you understand Scope 1, Scope 2, because as SMEs, that's the majority of what we've got to declare. Yes, we can get to the Scope 3, which is can be incredibly complex, but you've got to make sort of harsh decisions in that area. But once you've got your Scope 1, Scope 2 sorted out, you know your baseline. It's then we can actually look at a net zero strategy. What's your pathway? What accreditations are you going to be looking at? Are you going to be going the B Corp route? You're going to be looking at the ISO route. Why are you doing it, for starters? I mean, are you doing it because you need to actually comply with legislation? Are you complying with ESOS? Do you have supply chain issues? Or you just want to be ahead of the game? If you just want to be sort of ahead of your competitors because you know this is coming down the line to you. So you've got to understand why you're doing it and have a strategy to sort of do that and get that written up. Get that sort of put as part of your business strategy and look at sort of engaging with the employees and taking them on the journey with you. And again, monitor, report, measure. And then once you've sort of got your plan together, it's looking at Scope 3 emissions. Scope 3 emissions will probably far outweigh your own emissions. And a lot of mysticism around Scope 3, but really it's looking at all the things you don't control. And that can be done through purchase ledger to a very limited, to a degree. But when you're looking at Scope 3 as an SME, it's really about how far do you want to go? How far you being is demand to go. If you're looking for a government contract that's 5 million above, you're going to have to go to the nth degree. If you're just engaging with your clients and you don't want to be accused of greenwashing, then really sort of have a look at what you want to declare and do it properly. Energy efficiency. Once you understand where your energy is and where it's going, if you're not experts in energy, then get somebody in who is. So have an energy survey. There are chartered energy managers out there who quite happily come along and do a survey from top to bottom. And if you've got lots of data from your metering, your analytics, that'll make their job a hell of a lot easier and make it a lot cheaper for you. And pretty much from the top of that energy survey, they will come through with recommendations on where you can go, what's practical, give you an investment case, and hopefully going on there'll be things like putting hydrogen, micro hydrogen into places, making behavioural changes with your staff. But pretty much the first two things that tend to come out of energy surveys are the tried and tested. So on-site renewable, PV and LEDs. There's rarely an energy survey that come out that doesn't say have those if you haven't got them. Because bottom line, I'm not going to say they're old technology. They are reliable technology. They've been around for a few years. There's established paybacks, and they work. And we can jump down some great sort of different technologies, but bottom line, those two work. If you want to go for wind, you'll have planning problems. You've got CHP, you've got gas prices to worry about, but those two tend to be sort of some of the basics. Control cost, that's the other end of looking at. That's where I started in my life, looking at cost people. Really, I don't know if you've seen the energy prices or you've got involved in the energy market, but we are on a daily basis, and the issue is energy prices have gone up somewhere on electricity about 500% and in gas up to 1,000% for some clients. There's a term going around called demand destruction, it being used by the grid, which basically says, great, going forward we're not going to be using so much energy, and demand destruction actually means people going out of business because the energy prices are so high. We're seeing that happening already. It's beyond shocking. So managing your suppliers, that's very, very key. The suppliers are not there to help you, even though they try to help you. They're there to supply you with energy. There's no such thing as a fixed contract anymore. They're all sort of flavours and variations of variability, and you need to really understand what you're being sold, what the T's and C's are. People haven't really looked at this before. We've got big corporations that are totally unaware of their T's and C's and get very rude shocks when they get their bills and they come to end their contracts. So buy properly. Understand where your money's going, because when we look at purchase ledgers, we see that energy is very high up there, and unfortunately people can be very, very astute about their buying of their core products, but when it comes to things that sort of are 2-3 year contracts in this area, they tend to just don't really read what they're buying. You may need to get into the flexible market because, as I say, there is no such thing as a fixed contract anymore, and bill validation just to sort of check what's going on, because what we don't really want is people losing money or wasting money they could be spending on their net zero journey. As we mentioned before, with offsetting, that's a sort of a thorny subject. Do you offset or do you spend money on your assets? Looking a little bit out the future, battery storage is certainly coming. At the moment, it's not really there from the economic point of view. It's expensive but can work. And also DSR. DSR is a demand side response services. That's where once you've got your technology in place, and maybe you've got your PV on your roof, and you've got sort of understanding where your energy is. If you have capacity within your business, within your sites, with the way you manufacture things, or at least some degree of flexibility, you can sell that flexibility back to the grid, who are desperate to have assets they can turn up, turn down, or turn off, which won't affect you, so they can control the grid. So there are revenues being made there. So as I said, it's controlling the costs and the consumptions. To pay back, again, going back to costs, a lot of work you can do in this can be covered by R&D. R&D tends to be thought of as something you do in a lab, but actually there are R&D consultants that say, actually no, this is you have a question, how do I go net zero? This is you're researching the answers. So tax rebates, and also, as you've seen, there's funding even from space agencies to come with it. So at the end of the day, carbon offsetting, once you've reduced once you've analysed what's going on in your business, you've got your baseline, you've maybe installed PV, you've done the LEDs, you've worked your way down. The aim of net zero is really know where you are, know where you're going, reduce your emissions down, 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 and there's always going to be those vampire things at the bottom that are sucking your energy you can't really economically do anything about, and that's where you offset. And as somebody said, do you offset that to maybe a local sort of a UK program, or do you use that money you were going to offset and put it back into your business to reduce your carbon? Thank you.
Absolutely fantastic. Please come and chat to Richard. He'll be in the networking in the next few moments. So we were hoping to squeeze in a couple more guests, but unfortunately we've run out of time this session because it's been an action-packed show. So it's going to be Simon and Joe from City Science talking about a net zero project they're involved. However, you can talk to them in the networking session. We will share information afterwards, including a really good video, which is 3.5 minutes long. Also, we are planning other net zero related events for ExIST or ever. So City Science will be a big part of that, and we can talk about other things as well. So just a reminder, ExIST is a community, so please come on board if you're not a member, and as mentioned before, we do have sponsorship opportunities as well. Thank you very much to all of our speakers. I think they've been absolutely fantastic. Hopefully they've given some people ideas, and hopefully you can connect with them afterwards. And here's some of the contributors to the event today. Thank you for attending. You've been absolutely amazing, and I hope to chat to some of you outside with coffees outside. And just to remind you again, our next event is going to be physical at the Exeter Science Park, and it's all about the future of healthcare on the 14th of July. So hopefully I'll see some of you there. Also, I need to mention the Exeter Chamber. They've got a summer bash, a proper party. So it's on the 10th of June in the evening, loads of stuff going on. And if you go to their website, you'll be able to register and you'll be able to join there. So thank you very much. Have a lovely day and let's have a chat and keep the conversations going. So thank you.